Welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to see so many from every part of the globe. So I just had a quick look. We've got people from all the regions: Latin America, Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. So it's wonderful to see you all. And my name is Norman Doney, and I'm the interim chief executive of CCI Worldwide. And we're very pleased to introduce this EcoCare initiative to you. It's something that's been on our hearts and minds for a couple of years now. The first time we sort of introduced it worldwide was in 2020, when Anna did a seminar at the online replacement global gathering in 2020. And then since then, we've been taking time to think about how we can encourage EcoCare in a much wider sense across the world. And it's not simple, because every country has a different understanding of ecology and environmental opportunities and benefits. And so we've been working on that. And so we're pleased to welcome Anna back. And she's been working with us in a steering group just to think about how to encourage our principles of EcoCare around the world. And so we're starting off with some awareness raising using these seminars as a tool to do that. And we hope that by the global gathering in 2023, we'll be in a position to launch some kind of scheme worldwide. So Anna Whitehouse is a good friend of mine who used to live in the same village as me in Cranley until she upped and left and acquired a mountain reserve in South Africa called Philipscop. And so Anna is also on the board of CCI South Africa. And so we're very pleased to have you, Anna. And I think without further ado, I'll just pray for us all and then hand over to you to introduce this concept of EcoCare in the Christian camping world. Lord, I thank you for the creation that you have made, and the fact that you put us in it, the fact that you ask us to manage it and be responsible for it. We are amazed by its diversity and by its unpredictability at many times. And we do continue to seek your wisdom as to make the best use of the resources that you provide us with, and to be responsible managers of your world. And we pray for Anna now as she shares this with us all in your name. Amen. So Anna, I'm going to hand over to you to lead us in this session.
Thank you, Norman, and thank you all for coming. It's really great to see so many faces from different parts of the globe, and many of whom I've seen on other calls before. It's good to see you again. Okay, so I want to welcome you on behalf of the EcoCare Steering Committee to this first session. You may have been thinking, as you saw this advertised, that why is CCI thinking about creation care, when our mission is actually to use camp ministry to fulfill the Great Commission of Jesus Christ. We all know, don't we, that caring for creation is a good thing, but surely it's something for other people to focus on, and we need to focus on our core ministry, right? Well, for all of us, our heart's desire is to see people draw closer to Jesus. And what we're here to discuss today is where creation care fits into that, and why it's something we all do need to be thinking about. So why creation care? Well, there's a lot of reasons that we could discuss as to why Christians should be caring for God's creation. I'm only going to touch on a few today, and the ones that I touch on are really ones that connect with our core mission as people involved in Christian camping. So first of all, we carry out our mission in God's world, and that world is a world that he has called us, all of us, to care for. And if we are caring for his creation, we can actually enhance our mission. We have the opportunity to invite people to connect with God's creation. And as we do that, we have opportunities to introduce them to the creator of this amazing world. But on the flip side, if we don't care for God's creation, we can undermine our witness and damage our mission. People who care for the environment are not going to want to listen to Christians who claim that God made it all and then live lives that imply that they don't really care for the world that our Father God made. That's going to drive people away from Jesus, not draw them closer. So CCI EcoCare is all about helping us to think effectively about how we can incorporate creation care into our mission and into our ministries. It's not about changing our ministry or changing our mission. It's about how we can incorporate creation care naturally into what we're already doing in order to enhance what we're doing. Today, we're going to be focusing on connecting with the God of creation. And in a moment, Lisa's going to be speaking to us. But just before she does, a few more things from me. So I'm wondering what your favorite part of God's creation is. As Norman said, I'm living in South Africa now and privileged to live on a nature reserve, and we have a mountain right outside the window. I have a bunch of crazy sugar birds fighting for a feeder just outside the window to my right here, which I can't show you at the moment very easily, but they're there. And we have incredible floral diversity here. So there's loads of special things in God's creation that I'm surrounded by, and it's such a privilege. God not only created this amazing world that we live in, but he also teaches us about himself through his creation. Francis Bacon in the 16th century put it like this. He said God's given us two books about himself, his word and his world. So that's the scriptures and his creation. The book of Romans puts it this way. In chapter 1, verse 20, Romans says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made." And so as we look up at the night sky, together with the psalmist, we can all cry out, "The heavens declare the glory of God." And of course, Jesus told us to look at creation, didn't he? Jesus said, "Look at the birds of the air and the flowers of the field." Oh, look, there's one of our crazy sugar birds. It flew into a window last week, and that's my son. He's just helped revive it, and it's got a bit friendly. So yeah, Jesus told us to look at his creation. And can you remember the context that he said that in? He was talking about he was talking to people who were worried, wasn't he, in that particular passage? And he was saying, don't worry about your life and what you're going to wear and what you're going to eat. Rather, look at God's creation. He was helping us to find a strategy to deal with our worries. What about the book of Job? In the book of Job, Job is suffering, and he's perplexed by his suffering. And he cries out to God and asks God, "Why am I suffering?" And how does God answer? Well, in some ways, God doesn't really answer, but instead, he takes Job on a spectacular tour of God's creation. You can read it in Job 38 to 40. And at the end of the tour, Job realizes that he no longer really needs to know the answer to his question. He doesn't really need to know anymore why he's been suffering. Instead, he's got to know the God of creation better, and that in itself is enough for Job. Well, there are plenty of people in our world today who are worried and anxious and who are perplexed by suffering. And these people need to know our God. They need to know the God of creation. This morning or afternoon or evening, whatever time of day it is for you, I want to just quickly introduce you to two people who represent the kind of people that we might meet on our camps. First of all, a young schoolgirl. In August 2018, this young schoolgirl felt deeply concerned about the state of the planet and the way adults seemed to be aware of the problems, but not doing anything about them. She chose to act. She stayed away from school and she sat outside the Swedish Parliament buildings with a placard saying that she was school striking for the climate. Of course, she is Greta Thunberg, and I'm sure many of you will know of her. Her initially small action has led to a huge movement of young climate and environmental activists who passionately care for the state of our planet, and they're keen to take action. In many ways, these young people are leading the way in caring for our planet, but many of them have very little hope. and many of them are filled with eco-anxiety and fear for the future. They need people to lead them to the God of creation and the God of hope. But they're going to struggle to listen to us if we, who claim to know the creator of the universe as our Father, don't actively care for the world that they so passionately care for. Then there's Joe. Joe lives in inner city London, and I met him and many like him when I worked in the UK at a camp outside London in the Surrey Hills. Joe was terrified of the countryside. He'd never walked on a non-concrete path before, and he'd never experienced walking through mud. And there's lots of mud in Surrey, as Norman will tell you. We did a night hike, and we looked up at the stars. He'd never seen stars like that because of all the light pollution in the city. Our night hike led us into the woods. And at one point we sat down in a log circle and switched all our torches off and sat in silence. Joe had never experienced such darkness or such stillness before. He was used to having street lamps and the noise of traffic around him all the time. It touched him deeply. I wonder if you've met people like Joe on your camps. Over half of the world now live in urban areas, and many children spend more than half of their waking hours connected to screens. And it's all causing all sorts of problems in society: emotional, psychological, relational, and spiritual. Increasingly, people are recognizing that getting out into nature and connecting with nature is good for our health and well-being. And this is something that we in CCI can offer, because most of our camps take people into the outdoors. And of course, we have even more to offer them, because as they connect with nature, we have opportunities to introduce them to the God of creation, who reveals himself to us not only through his word, but also through his world. And for some of these people, introducing them to God first through his creation is going to be more accessible than first of all sitting them down and opening up the Bible. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Lisa. Thank you, Lisa, for being willing to speak to us. Lisa, please would you introduce yourself to us, tell us where you are and what you're doing with CCI, and then Lisa's going to go on to tell us how they in her part of the world are helping kids to connect with nature. And perhaps you can tell us something about how it's impacting their lives, Lisa. So I'm going to hand over to Lisa. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here and for that excellent introduction. It's been a wonderful opportunity to be part of this committee. And one of the things that we have been talking about is God's creation. In CCI Latin America, we're recognizing that this, what we're calling a great migration. There's a lot of organizations that are amazing in terms of their engagement with this whole issue. And so this is actually the great migration from the outdoors to the indoors really started even before the pandemic. Anna mentioned that, the kids are spending half their time on screens. And so therefore many people there, Richard Lohr has a very famous book about nature deficit syndrome. And that was even identified before the pandemic. So you can imagine, what that feels like now. So here's what CCI Latin America is doing because of the loss of contact and not just looking at creation or contact, but actually deep engagement, experience with God's creation is what we're trying to alert. Basically, we're talking about alerting and equipping camping leaders, parents, and educators. And so we're doing that through an online connection of nature exploration activities. So at this point, we're in the process, we're beta testing our web app, and we're hoping to launch it soon. Obviously, this is all in Spanish. So I do have a couple Spanish few here. I got David, Frank, and Manjani from Panama and Masai. So we've got some translators there. Welcome. Thank you for being here. So let's just take a peek at what we have in our web app, which is, it's kind of the practical angle of, okay, we have a problem. We've got people who are in a position to do something, camping leaders, educators, and parents. but how can we equip them? So what we're doing is we're actually have created a web app. So I'm going to show you guys this. So the web app begins actually with, you're on the screen with activities, and it says, learn to enjoy nature. And so what you do is you kind of just type in here, and I typed in bellotas, which means like pine cones. So a bunch of activities come up where that word is mentioned. Okay. So the person comes in here, says, look, I'm in a pine forest, and so you type in here. And so let's say, I'm with hummingbirds. Okay. That's something that is in the area that I'm in. Okay. So I have these activities, and I guess what's particularly unique is that right now there's about 70 that we've uploaded these activities. We hope to have around 300 in the end. But what's unique is the practicality of saying, okay, I have, hummingbirds. So you have right now, you're seeing on the screen, there's 5 activities. Okay. So let me tell you about what we have them. They're arranged in a sequence. If you're familiar with Joseph Cornell is the creator of what he called flow learning. And so if an educator goes in and says, look, I just have time, 20 minutes in my class, he can just choose one activity. But if it's like a camp setting where you have more time, or a parent that has more time, you can follow this 5-stage sequence. And so let me just kind of, I'll let you kind of, we'll look at the screen. And so the first sequence, the first stage of the sequence is called awakening enthusiasm. So you have here this picture of, it's kind of a picture where they're looking at, they have to move different chocolates, and they look at them. It's kind of a game, because most people nowadays who are not accustomed to being out in nature, adolescents particularly, they're kind of hesitant. I remember we use these activities in our Sunday school class, and I remember the girls who were like looking at it and sitting on the bench and like, no, I don't want to touch anything. Like, there was this huge hesitancy. So you start with a game. Then you go, it's called Nature Detectives is the second one here. And this is you get them enthused, then you focus their attention. And so you go on a hike and you look for the hummingbirds, and you have an observation sheet that says, okay, what are some of the characteristics? So it's drawing their attention into the unique factors of the hummingbird. Then the third activity is you have direct experience, and this gets you fully immersed. And so they analyze, they look at the design. There's like a model of the hummingbird, and you begin to look at the unique aspects like the beak, the wings and the velocity. The leader has a number, there's a lot of information provided, and then they're literally laying on the ground and they're out there and they're beginning, then you bring and you're drawing them. The features here. And that then flows into this is where we modified Joseph Cornell. Joseph Cornell lives out in California and kind of like a commune. So they're kind of new agey, what we would call as Christians kind of. And so we modified his stage to say, okay, the 4th stage is you will worship the creator and not the creation. And so this is where the participants analyze the hummingbirds to look at what are some of the characteristics of God that are manifested in his creation. And so you're focusing their attention towards the creator. And so the activity is actually where they're writing out, and they kind of create a psalm that they use to praise the Lord. So it's called a unique opportunity to worship God. That's the activity regarding the hummingbird. And so that we don't just stay with the command to worship the Lord, we actually, the last activity has to do with conservation. And that's where you practically engage in something that will help conserve and care for God's creation. So here's where they actually build a what's the word in English? A bird feeder for hummingbirds. Okay, so that's the last activity. Now, what does it look like? Let's click on one of these and say, okay, this is what does this activity look like? So what is prepared is you've got an image, you have the uniform way that all of these activities are, is that you've got a list of materials. You have to one side how long it's going to last. You have your ecological theme that you're focused on. You have what stage it is, to be stewards of creation. And then you've got a list of, okay, here's the materials, what you need. Then you have instructions for the group, so that literally the group is in front of you. You can say, hey, this is exactly what you need to do. And then you've got particularly notes for the facilitator, the director. So this is kind of like tips for the guy or the woman who's directing the activity. You have the additional resources. So this would be, material that you could click on for maybe a video or something. And then the last one is the references. And so this was, created by Mónica Carrillo in Mexico. So to make sure that we're, giving credit to the author or to the reference, not committing plagiarism. So this is the sequence of activities and what all of them, basically, it's in a uniform way so that all the activities. And so what we're finding is we have used all of these activities. Like part of it is that they're activities that have been practiced. So the writers have kind of the firsthand experience of making sure that this is not just a good idea, but an actual practical. So that's what we're trying to do, to say, look, we have a problem. We have people who are on the front line, with young people and kids, and who can actually do something. And so this is an equipping tool. So before I move off this line, if you have other questions, I do want to give credit Manjani, who's from Panama, who's on this call. This was produced through the collective efforts of 30 people who are part of a program in CCI Latin America that are learning to write, to edit, and to design. So we're using this useful product to form a team of writers for Latin America, for CCI Latin America. So it's actually killing, you don't want to talk about killing two birds, right? That wouldn't be ecologically correct, but we're killing two birds with a project to say, okay, here, we don't kill hummingbirds, but we're dealing with forming writers. And at the same time, we're creating a product that we believe will be useful for the Spanish speaking population. So are there any things that you want to understand about the web app? Obviously, it is all in Spanish. So let me open mic here if you want to make some comments.
Yeah, Rafa's just mentioned, can we have it in English? Well, we certainly want eventually to benefit from all the work that you've done, and also there may be work done in other parts of the world which can be converted from other languages into Spanish. So we'd certainly like to do that.
Thank you. Thanks, Norman. And thanks, Kira from Ontario. What an amazing, you like the work through the sequencing, getting comfortable, and then towards knowing more about God and actually worshiping him, and then having some action related to conservation. For instance, I did one about dogs. And so we had this sequencing of being with dogs. And then the last activity was to go to a dog shelter, where we participate in something, feeling like the heart change. I mean, you can be environmentally, what we're finding is that it can become a political movement instead of, it's detaching from the opportunity to be with God's creation. And so instead of moving to the politics of it, to be able to say, kids are going to appreciate creation if they're immersed in it and they have an experience more so than just a political statement, you know, about climate change, but that they can actually do something.
Colin has asked in the chat, is it an individual activity or a group activity? So how could you use it in different ways?
We found that this is interesting. We were doing, because we created this in 2021 in the middle of the pandemic in Latin America. We have writers and editors and all from 10 different countries. So they were practicing it with like 1 or 2 people, family members, because we weren't allowed to meet, you know, in groups. And so we discovered that a lot of the activities could be actually done individually, you know, with a couple people, but the, you know, the vision is that you do it like with a group of people. But we did discover that Colin, that both it works as an individual or as a group. Thanks you from Raf from Ghana about they can create their own song. It's been an amazing thing to see. Okay, how do we take them to so that the nature, you create a space, because how can you force someone to worship God? Like the 4th stage of worshiping the Lord, it's not, you can make them like draw a picture of a hummingbird pretty much, you know, or you know, analyze it, but worship is kind of, you have to do it of your own volition. So that stage had been the most difficult to create, to be able to say, here's the space God's creation inspires, and maybe this is, you know, these are the activities that we can do, which would be conducive to an act of worship, kind of like when Israel, you know, would put those rocks together and do a memorial. That was an act of worship. So that's kind of the vision. Tatiana, what do you think? This will work in the Ukraine? We got some Spanish speakers there?
Yes, sure. And actually, Vladimir and I, we were remembering that you taught a course about worshiping the God of creation for CCI Ukraine. And that's when we got interested in this, actually. And this app looks amazing. Yeah.
Also, it's interesting that you're talking about hummingbirds there, which is, they're not everywhere. And other places will have different environments and different animals. And I think, you know, we can look, you can have mountains, rivers, there's all sorts of different potential in every place.
Good point. The ecosystems, we obviously, because we're from Latin America and we're doing it from Mexico to Argentina, you know, we have like the jungle activities, and then there's some desert and, you know, with dunes and stuff. So you're right. Probably we do it, the web app is created such that we hope to be able to eventually translate it into English. But that would, you know, require obviously the additional funding, you know, to be able to work on that translation.
I think the other thing is that you have the model, the sort of template, as it were, and it may well be that, for example, we could give that to Tatiana and say, well, okay, you choose an animal or an environment or area that would work in your country, and then we could end up with a library of, you know, from right across the world.
Sure.
Lisa, I have a question. When I'm looking at this, like, I'm all for creation care. I don't know why, like, to the end yet why, but I feel this is the right direction. Many clever people are talking about it, but still, on the other hand, I think it's very close to that Maslow pyramid. When your basic needs are covered, then you can afford thinking about these upper level things. I'm just talking very practically, because like Alexander, he was fighting on Facebook for this creation care things, and a lot of people in Ukraine are saying, why are you guys doing all that? Just you go and save the souls and stuff. So I'm thinking, like, Latin America is not a very rich or wealthy place. So how are you solving that? What are you dealing with? Because we cannot just take for granted that people will accept it in the countries that are not very well off. So we have to kind of approach it prepared to introduce these things.
Excellent point. One of the things about the Latin America is we are very rich in natural resources. And as Anna mentioned, the fact that half of the population of the world is urban, in Latin America, it's more towards 70%. So it's even higher. So you have an urban population that has that sense of needing, the natural sense of, okay, I need to get out of this, the city. So the fact that we're saying it's not just for the wealthy who have the opportunity or the funds or the material resources to say, okay, now I'm well fed, I can now care for creation. You have that innate need to connect. And so our population, we work with pretty much it would be the middle socioeconomic, lower, and fewer on the higher is kind of our mid-range. And what we found is a tremendous receptiveness. And so that's why we got so practical. Rather than doing it, hey, you have to care for nature, we said, okay, here's our angle. It's like, here's a how-to. Let me let Manjani and Masai, because they're Latin Americans. Manjani, do you want to respond to Vladimir's comment?
Si pudieras traducirme, por favor.
Okay, go for it.
¿Podrías mencionarme nuevamente el comentario para?
Es que él decía por la gente pobre, y realmente, ¿acaso será que ellos tienen la posibilidad de interesarse en la naturaleza cuando más bien es algo como la jerarquía de Maslow, de que solo la gente de mayor riqueza les interesa? No sé si quieres responder a esto.
Ok, bueno, creo que fue algo que conversamos en cuanto al estatus social cuando estábamos haciendo las actividades y tuvimos que hacer el mural. Creo que fue parte de los diálogos.
One of the things we did is we had a marketing expert come in, and we worked on who is the target audience in terms of what's their socioeconomic level and what are the things that they're angst, what are they? And a lot of them came out that the amount of screens now cuts across socioeconomic, that everyone each has a cell phone, and that's just straight across the board. And so this guy was able to help us say, no, this is also, we're targeting even those who their screen is a cell phone. Colin?
Hi there. It wasn't really so much a question, but a comment. I did a series of posts about our camp, and it sort of happened by accident. We wanted to kind of highlight our camp and celebrate that we've been 70 years in existence. So I started to reach out and say what animals, what plants, what insects, and so on are on the campsite. We have 106 acres of land. And the things that we discovered when we started to do that were just incredible. We have aspen trees, which you might think, what could be special about aspen trees? But when you'll discover the biology behind it, you find out that each grove is actually one plant and that they live for 10,000 years. And so from the time that the ice age has ended, these plants, groves of aspen trees, are in fact just one plant just growing. We found ants that build these hills, and I could go on. We found certain kinds of minerals, rocks on the land that are kind of neat. And I think there's just so many ways that you can enrich people's experience of the camp by giving them some background knowledge about some of these things without trying to lecture. Somehow, if you can do it without lecturing.
Colin, you make a good point, because the theory is the activities are not a science class. So we completely separated from outdoor education, which is information. And we said it's more formative to have an experience and will make you more inclined to care for God's creation rather than a science class. Raf, you had your hand raised as well from Ghana.
Yes, I wanted to ask this question. Where Africa has come from and our way of worship when it comes to natural things like trees and birds and all that. And in Africa, they see a particular tree as a smaller god, and so it is very dicey. It's very confusing in this regards. So how will we be able to marry and to let the people know, or the campus know, that this is a real god, not the god of our fathers, or like a smaller god kind of. So how will we be able to put a message across for them to really understand? Thank you very much.
That's very interesting, Raf, because in a lot of the countries we have, particularly in the indigenous populations in the Andes countries, have they call it papa, like Mother Nature, and it's very animistic. Like that's where they're coming from, and a lot of Catholicism did synchronism with the animistic, which is like the worship of the different parts of nature. So this, again, the whole idea is, the thrust is to give them a practical way to direct their attention away from Mother Nature as the object towards the Lord. So I guess we have a similar thing with Africa in terms of the prevalence of animism. I wanted to give Masai, as a Panamanian, also an opportunity to make a Pachamama you put in the chat. Thank you. Did you want to make a comment as a Latin American?
And hi. As the questions before, I was thinking that if the part of like the indigenous people, I think they would like it because they care about it. One of the things that they care, and even more in the parts talking about Darien, that's a province here in Panama, they don't want a railway, a road. They don't want a road because they care about their habitat and where their homes are. So for that reason, if we use this tool to teach them or like to give them the opportunity of like know how to use it in a more creative way, maybe they can like use it to show people that they're fighting for something that is really good, because they are fighting for something that is their house, their habitat, and it's something that is part of them. And not just that, is because creation is something that I really like that Anna said about creation is another book that God has given to us. So I think that I wanted to share that. Thank you.
And also the point you made earlier about people coming out from cities, they may have an interest or a concern about ecology, but they don't understand it because they've never experienced it. So this is a very positive way of introducing that. I had a question though to you, which is how much ecological or environmental understanding is needed to write up one of these apps, one of the documents. So if, like I suggested, giving Tatiana a template to look at, say, another animal or plant or area, is that something a sense of, how can I put it, a normal sensible person could do, or does it require someone with an environmental degree or environmentalist to actually write them?
Oh my goodness, we are not environmentalists, experts at all. Of the 30 people working on this, we are just, we're happy campers. We love God's creation, and none of us have any degree whatsoever in the natural sciences, because we said a parent is not a science teacher. Camping people and recreational directors. So it's definitely for someone like Tatiana, who says, okay, what's the template? We build it so that if someone wanted to be able to follow it, it would be a very easy transference to be able to do that. So for sure, we've actually had a ball doing them. We've had people like of the 300 activities that will eventually have up, all of them have been practiced. So we because we are forming writers, as you know, our excuse was let's make this collection, but the goal is that you're being formed as a writer and editor. We actually had a ball with people being like, look, I'm not really that into nature. And then by experiencing it and getting someone else to experience it, they kind of got converted. I mean, we're not all running around, you know, like what's her face in Sweden, you know, in the front of the parliament or anything, but in terms of a very, you know, visceral sort of relationship and appreciation for God's creation, that's what we're seeing formed with the writers and the people they practiced with. Ruth, you look like you're so interested. Do you just want to make a comment?
I'm just trying to be like, how can I take this to our camp? How can I take it to ICCA? Can we create a template for India? India. How do we introduce it? And I think like what Vladimir said, pretty similar, because the basic needs are so high. I would probably have the same questions, like, shouldn't we focus on people and, you know, all of that? But I'm trying to figure out like, I could take this and say this to them to help them incorporate more of creation care in camping, like even just for volunteers to be trained to know certain things in their environment, so that just at the top of their, you know, heads when they're having a conversation, just to bring it up just in conversation. So I was just trying to think of how to put it into action. Yeah.
Colin, you have another comment?
Yeah, in terms of activities, if it's an experience, did you have like activities to touch things, to taste things?
All five senses. When you get to the third, oh, totally. It's like in the mud, in the, like, it was, we got full body experience was what we're looking for. At
Yeah, because I think
stage,
Joseph Campbell talks about
that way.
Trying to recognize trees by the texture of the bark and stuff with your eyes blindfolded and all these kinds of activities you can do, right?
That's his famous. In fact, we were in contact and talked to Joseph Cornell and asked him permission to use 15 of his activities because he's kind of the guru, you know, on this side of the world. Robin, where are you from and what would you like to share?
Hi, I'm also from India. I was going through the link that you had sent in. I just want to appreciate the amount of, the work that you have done. It's really amazing. And I was going through, my browser translated the whole thing for me in English, and I was going through the activities. I'm really amazed that you have 5 senses. I mean, I was just reading through it, do this activity, but the very fact, one activity I was reading, I was saying, just go out and follow the smell. I mean, it's amazing to see how, and I'm really excited to see this because I'm sure campers would love to engage in all 5 senses. And I'm really excited to see this because we've been talking about camping always about the outdoors, but the way you have now integrating the digital and the outdoors together and helping campers to go through the smooth transition, that's pretty amazing. And I really want to appreciate for the amount of work that you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin. There is it because 95% of our populations have cell phones. The idea is that if you're out in the middle somewhere, we're like, you're at a camp and dinner's late and you have, you know, half an hour. We said, we want them to be able to get it that quick to say, I got 30 minutes and I got pine cones. What can I do? Because every single person almost in Latin America has a cell phone. So that's like the mobile friendly idea. Thanks for the affirmation.
Because the other thing is, this is a great enhancement for some of the activities we might do. Like we're saying, okay, we've got basic needs to cover, but most of us on a camp would go for a short walk or, wander around the property or wander around the woods or forest. And just having these as additional opportunities to say, well, we're going for a walk, but on the way we're going to look out for this or that or the other thing, and bring in I think the other important point that Raf mentioned and then you talked about is not worshiping the creation, but worshiping the creator and always finding a way to return it back. And Anna, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on the comment that Ruth made and Vladimir as well about in societies where we've got huge needs of poor people and so on. And, you know, shouldn't we be focusing on people's needs rather than on the environment? And I think in many ways it's a false dichotomy, because, you know, if you've got a bunch of campers from inner city London who, you know, come from a very poor background, and you take them out into the countryside, you are enriching their lives by helping them to interact with creation. And I absolutely love your app and the way it gets people hands-on, dirty, you know, really involved and connecting, and that's going to enrich their lives. So it's going to be helping them. And on a bigger picture scale, we need to be thinking about caring for creation in order to help poverty, because as we damage our planet, it's always the poorer peoples and the poorer communities that suffer first. So I think in many ways it is a false dichotomy. And I think let's focus on enriching those people's lives that we have in order to help them to want to care for creation, because that will help their people the most in the long term.
And that's an excellent point. One of the activities was created by, she's a Salvadorian, is a missionary, Niger, and Niger, materially poor is incredible. And so she created a sequence where the last activity of it, they were on sand dunes, and the activity was like learning what are the tracks left in the sand by the different, you know, animals that live in the desert. And the last activity had to do with cleaning and picking up litter in a kind of a creative way. And she said that several weeks later, they talked about how the people who were living in huts cleaned up the garbage, that their garbage was just throw it out the back door. And so, as you said, even though they were materially poor, they began to get a consciousness about cleaning up the garbage. And she was working with, you know, people who weren't believers, they were Muslims, but that's what was the result of her doing that activity with them.
Now, I'm aware we just got about 5 minutes left. And I wonder whether, Anna, you want to sort of pick it up for the last 5 minutes. This is sort of a part of a multifaceted approach to eco-care. And this one is related to activities that individuals and groups can do as part of a camp program. We also have another facet, which is really about the center management aspect. So Anna, do you just want to mention that? And perhaps that will highlight what we're going to cover in one of the other sessions.
Yeah, so as a team, we're trying to work towards thinking about ways to help centers to run their businesses in a way that cares for God's creation. So it's the interaction with campus, but it's also how we run our businesses, how we work in our offices and in our kitchens and so on. And we've been working on a questionnaire, which some of you on this call have seen, which we're hoping will be something that can inspire people and give them ideas to spur them on in ways forwards with creation care. So we may be launching that next year at the Global Gathering. That's what we're working towards and seeing if we can work towards. Any input that anybody would like to give would be really welcome. Any thoughts or, yeah, if you want to trial the questionnaire for me, then give me a shout and I'll send it to you, and you can do a trial. A number of people have, but the more people that do from different parts of the world, the better it's going to end up, and the more applicable to all of us it will be. Obviously, we can't make it sort of perfect for every different situation, but the idea is to inspire and encourage people in the CCI family to care for God's creation. And then in terms of these seminars, our next seminar is at the beginning of May, on the 3rd of May, and we're going to be focusing on climate change in that one, and talking about climate change and mission. And we've got a climate scientist coming to speak to us. He's been in missions for 22 years. He works for YWAM. So I'm sure that, you know, he's got a lot in common with CCI, but as a climate scientist, he can explain to us something of why, as people involved in missions, why we should care about the climate and actually what's going on with the climate. So please keep your eye open for that, and please do invite others in your region to join us for that one. I think it's going to be really eye-opening. And I want to thank Lisa. It's been fantastic to hear what you're doing. It's absolutely amazing and really exciting. And I think if we could get it around the world, it would be awesome, and just a really great resource, but a really wonderful thing for pointing people to God's creation and helping them to take that journey. I love the steps as to, you know, how you take the steps and you draw them closer to worshiping God and taking actions in their lives from that place of, you know, let's just get them involved, let's get them enthused, let's help them to see God's creation, because that's really the problem, isn't it? Many people don't see what's out there, and so they can't appreciate it. So thank you very much, Lisa. And it would be lovely to close in prayer. Do we have a volunteer to close in prayer for us today? Vian, thank you.
Lord Jesus, thank you so much for this precious hour. Thank you that for those who joined in and those who listened, and I ask that the seeds are planted and watered and come to blooming in this love for creation. Thank you, God, that you've made this beautiful, beautiful world, and help us to all see how we can impact people around us to appreciate it with your eyes. Thank you for the conveners of the session. Thank you for Anna and for Lisa. Please bless them. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all for coming. It's been a real encouragement to have so many of you from so many different places, and it's been inspiring to hear all that's been done, and also to think ahead to what we can do together and how we can take this forward. So thank you again for coming, and we'll see you soon.